He has been showing other pictures aimed at putting the fear into the opposition. It isn't clear whether these men are alive or dead, though at least one is still moving. There was a message as well: give all your weapons in and we won't harm you. It's unlikely to be believed by the protesters. It's hardly surprising the government wants the opposition to agree to a weapons amnesty. These images from Misrata in the west, said to be the scene of new fighting after falling to the opposition, suggest the uprising has as many heavy weapons as the army. During his latest address, Gaddafi offered the opinion that Libya's tribal leaders, some of whom have been meeting in Al-Baida, should be taking more responsibility for local government and controlling their young people, though here they said they were more interested in the United Nations coming to save them. Gaddafi said he himself had become more of a symbolic leader of Libya.
As the proverb says, you carry a leaking bag full of water, it will make your backside wet. And that is your responsibility. It's none of my concern anymore.
This was an address different in tone and content to his speech of Tuesday night. Wishful thinkers might hope it sounded almost valedictory. Or perhaps in arguing that he isn't really leader and therefore isn't in charge, it was simply a denial of responsibility.
Peace be on Al Zawiya and its people.
Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
A prayer for those who died in the name of freedom. These are tribal leaders and representatives of eastern Libya meeting to denounce the government of Tripoli and trying to forge their way ahead. Presiding was former Justice Mustafa Abdel Galil, who resigned soon after the revolt began.
We want one country. There is no Islamic Emirate or Al-Qaeda anywhere. Our only aim is to liberate Libya from this regime and for the people to choose the government they want.
Also attending were military commanders who refused to open fire on their countrymen and women.
I am proud to wear my military uniform, and I'm really sorry for all what happened. But I'm here to tell you that we are here to protect the youth, the people, and to fulfill any of your demands. The blood of the martyrs will not be in vain.
The fighting may have stopped in the east, but life is at a standstill. Military barracks are destroyed, and security is left in the hand of civilians. The classrooms of one school have been turned into a detention center by anti-Gaddafi forces, soldiers and civilians who were flown in and given orders to open fire on protesters. Among them, several nationals from Chad.
They told us there was a free flight to Tripoli. Instead, we landed here. Then they said that we should join the protest to support Gaddafi, but we find ourselves in the middle of fighting.
Despite Gaddafi's hold on power, Libyans here in the east of the country refuse his rule. There is no way back, they say. The people of the east will never fall under the rule of Tripoli as long as Gaddafi remains the leader of the country.
We have with us Tariq Youssef in the studio. He's the Dean of the Dubai School of Government and joins us here in Doha to discuss Libya. Welcome to the program. So once again, it's a fast-moving story, fast-moving development. What's been the most significant for you over the past 24 hours?
The resignation of Ahmed Gaddafi al-Dam, his cousin, his envoy to Egypt for 30 years, his close confidant, his right-hand man in tribal dealings and foreign relations.
So put that into context for us then. What could that mean?
That means to me that even within his very small core circle of confidants and loyalists, they're seeing the end is near and they're choosing to defect. They're choosing to make an exit. The resignation of someone like Ahmed Gaddafi al-Dam, in addition to all the other resignations, I think makes Gaddafi weaker, less acceptable internationally, less powerful inside, and makes even his own city of Tripoli, where he's hiding right now and acting defiantly against the will of much of the Libyan public, a much less tenable position beyond a few days or at most a week.
What's your take on what Muammar Gaddafi said today And the way that he said it, we saw him speak by telephone to Libyan state television and not appear in vision. I mean, what could that mean? What can we read into that?
We have been used to, the last 42 years, seeing Gaddafi speaking only in front of thousands and thousands of masses. The last few speeches, he's been speaking alone or to a few individuals. Now he's again hiding, speaking behind closed doors. That suggests to me that even his own psychological state has been further deteriorated in the last couple of days, and he no longer feels comfortable coming out, especially after seeing the reactions, both regionally, internationally, and locally, to the speech just from a couple of days ago.
And we could see some international reaction now coming in. We heard on Thursday that Switzerland now is freezing any assets that Muammar Gaddafi and his family might have in Switzerland. First of all, can you put a figure on these assets?
We will never know. It could be 100 billion, it could be 150 billion. The fact of the matter is that Libya has exported over $800 billion worth of oil in the last 40 years. Much of it has not been accounted for fully. Significant amounts of it were siphoned off and never reported back to Treasury. These assets have accumulated vast sums over time. It wouldn't surprise me that the assets accumulated by Gaddafi's family and close confidants and loyalists could be around 150 billion, or could in fact exceed that figure.
Well, what we know from WikiLeaks, a WikiLeaks cable has revealed that Gaddafi's family controls $32 billion in liquid assets around the world, and this is controlled by the country's sovereign wealth fund. And also, the WikiLeaks cable says that there are hundreds of millions of dollars invested in US banks as well as in the UK. So in that context, why have we not seen the US and the UK take any targeted measures towards freezing these assets?
Partly because it's difficult to differentiate what belongs to Gaddafi's family from what belongs to the Libyan government.
But it's the same thing, isn't it?
It could be the same thing. So Gaddafi uses his personal accounts, those of his loyalists, and those of the Libyan government at large to essentially conduct foreign policy, to conduct commercial relations, and to conduct personal business. That makes it extremely difficult, short of a complete freeze of all assets belonging to the Libyan regime, to the Libyan government and his personal accounts, to in fact make that distinction.
All right, Tariq Youssef, thank you very much for your thoughts there on Libya.
Pleasure.
Well, the United States has taken an active role in recent years in persuading Muammar Gaddafi to neutralize his country's chemical weapons. And for more on that, we can cross over to Jane Dutton, who's at the White House in Washington. Jane.
Thanks for that, Doreen. Well, Libya's former justice minister said that Gaddafi has got chemical weapons, that he may well use them. And as you can imagine, that's sounding alarm bells here in Washington. Let me give you a sense of what role chemical weapons have played up until now. In 2003, soon after the toppling of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Libya agreed to dismantle its nuclear and chemical weapons programs. In return, the Bush administration resumed diplomatic relations and lifted economic sanctions. The next year, Libya destroyed 3,300 unloaded aerial bombs used to disperse mustard gas and other chemical agents. But disputes between Washington and Tripoli over